Beneath the shimmering surface of the water, something may be watching, not from the shore, not from the waves, but from a place so deep, so dark, that light itself refuses to enter. If any creature from the prehistoric world still walks or swims among us, it didn't return, it never left, because the ocean doesn't just hide things, it keeps them. Covering over 70% of our planet, Earth's oceans remain the least explored regions in the natural world. We've mapped the surface of Mars with more precision than we've mapped the seafloor beneath our own feet. More than 95% of the ocean is still a mystery, and every year, scientists catalog tens of thousands of new species, many of them unlike anything seen before. Some are microscopic, others glow, some challenge our understanding of biology itself. We live on a blue planet, but in truth, we've only ever skimmed its surface, and that's exactly what makes it so terrifying. Because no one fears the dark more than those who don't know where they are. And in the icy, crushing depths of the sea, where silence reigns and sunlight dies, there may be things that were never meant to be found. Creatures that never went extinct because extinction never touched them. So today, we ask a question too few dare to ask: what still lives beneath? There is a place on this planet where sunlight never reaches, where the horizon is made of ice and the wind howls like a forgotten memory. In the silent waters off the coast of Antarctica, one of the most remote and unforgiving regions on Earth, something has been seen. Or perhaps something has allowed itself to be seen. The first reports came from a Japanese whale research vessel navigating the southern Pacific Ocean. On a cold, moonless night, their ship passed through a patch of dense fog when something vast surfaced near the hull. The crew froze. What they witnessed was not a whale and not a trick of the eye. It was something else entirely. They called it Ningen. In Japanese, the word simply means human, but what they saw that night was not human, not really. It measured nearly 90 feet in length, longer than a commercial airplane. Its skin was ghost white, smooth and featureless like freshly fallen snow. The head was round, devoid of any discernible facial structure. And yet it evoked a strange familiarity, almost as if someone had imagined it, sculpted it in their mind, and it had somehow emerged from that thought into flesh. Where its legs should have been, there were none. Instead, two massive arm-like fins stretched outward, drifting in the current like pale, boneless tendrils. Its lower half ended in a long, tapering tail, not unlike a mermaid, but with none of the enchantment. There was no beauty in its form, only dread. There are no high-resolution photographs, no confirmed scientific records, just blurry images, grainy videos, and crude hand-drawn sketches from sailors too shaken to sleep. But what makes the Ningen different from so many other cryptids is that the sightings haven't stopped. Since the early 2000s, multiple Japanese crews operating in the southern hemisphere have come forward. Some claim to have seen it gliding just beneath the waves, slow and silent. Others say it only appears at night, vanishing the moment light touches its skin, as if it fears being remembered. Theories abound. Some believe it is a new species of deep-sea whale. Others dismiss it as a hoax, a ghost story told at sea. But there's something about the Ningen that defies easy answers. Unlike sea monsters shaped like dragons or sharks, the Ningen doesn't look like a predator. It looks familiar. It looks like a person, a human-like figure drifting alone at the end of the earth, in waters we were never meant to enter. If it truly exists, lurking beneath Antarctica's frozen veil, then the question isn't just what is the Ningen? Why does it resemble us, and what else is out there, waiting in the cold, that we have yet to name? It began with something simple, just another research tag on just another great white shark. In 2004, off the coast of Australia, marine biologists were tracking a female great white shark. She was over 9 feet long, a seasoned apex predator. For 4 months, she swam along the coastline, predictable, calm, unremarkable, and then something happened. At exactly 4:00 a.m., On Christmas Eve, the tracking data showed a sudden plunge. The shark dove straight down, almost 1,900 feet in under 2 minutes. The descent was so fast, so precise, that researchers believed the tag must have detached and fallen to the ocean floor. But it hadn't, because something about the data didn't make sense. The tag recorded the surrounding water temperature throughout the dive. Instead of dropping, as it should have, in the icy depths, it remained warm, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Not the 46 degrees expected at that depth, not even close. That meant one thing: the tag hadn't fallen off. It had been swallowed. The shark didn't dive, it was dragged, whole. When the tag was later recovered, it was coated in a substance that left no doubt: partially digested. The device had passed through a digestive tract. It had been inside something alive. But what kind of creature could ambush a great white shark and swallow it whole? Some proposed a killer whale. Orcas are intelligent, strategic, and have been known to prey on sharks. But no orca has ever been recorded diving deeper than 850 feet, not even half the depth of the descent. The most accepted theory, published in 2014, suggested that the predator may have been an even larger great white, perhaps driven by territorial aggression or desperation. But this explanation, too, began to fall apart. Great white sharks rarely engage in cannibalism, especially not in the nutrient-rich waters off Australia's coast. And most conflicts between sharks end in display, not death. Then there's the temperature. No known great white has an internal body temperature that high, not even close. And so the question returns, colder than the sea itself. What did this? And it's here that an ancient name begins to echo through the minds of those who study the deep. Megalodon, from the Greek megas, giant, and odon, tooth. Megalodon was the largest predatory shark to ever live. Estimated to grow over 60 feet in length, with jaws that could crush a small car and teeth the size of a grown man's hand. According to mainstream science, it went extinct 6 million years ago, but not everyone agrees. Throughout the last century, reports have surfaced from California, South Africa, Japan, Argentina, tales of monstrous shadows beneath boats, of teeth pulled from ocean floors far younger than they should be. In 1875, during an expedition by the HMS Challenger, a massive tooth was dredged from the deep. Carbon dating suggested it was only 11,000 years old. That's more recent than the earliest known civilizations, and if that's true, then Megalodon may not have died. It may have simply withdrawn, into the dark, into the silence, into the parts of the ocean we've never reached and may never dare to. Perhaps extinction isn't always an ending. Sometimes it's just an escape. War has a way of uncovering strange things. In 1915, during the height of World War I, the German submarine U patrolled the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Its mission was simple: intercept and sink enemy supply ships. On July 30th, it spotted a target, the British merchant vessel Iberian. A torpedo was launched. The explosion was clean, brutal, and final. The Iberian lifted from the sea, cracked open like a toy, and began its slow descent into the depths. That should have been the end of the story, but what happened next is what made it unforgettable. Roughly 25 seconds after the ship disappeared beneath the surface, a second explosion, unexplained, deeper, more violent, erupted from below. And from the blast something rose, not metal, not debris, not wreckage, a creature. According to the submarine's commander, Georg Gunther Freiherr von Forstner, the beast was hurled into the air, twisting, writhing, and glistening in the sunlight. Nearly 80 feet long, 4 massive flipper-like limbs, a powerful tail, and a head shaped like something ancient, something reptilian, something not of this age. 6 of his senior officers saw it too. Not one of them forgot it. Their descriptions were recorded in the ship's log, not as myth, not as rumor, but as a matter of official report. And when those reports were studied years later, paleontologists were struck by how closely the descriptions matched a creature long thought extinct, the Mosasaur, a marine reptile that once ruled the oceans during the age of dinosaurs, sleek, powerful, and capable of growing over 60 feet long. With a jaw designed not just to kill, but to shatter. According to mainstream science, the Mosasaur vanished 66 million years ago during the mass extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs. But what if it did? What if the blast from the torpedo unearthed something that had been hidden beneath the ocean floor, or sleeping in a trench untouched by sunlight for millions of years? The incident aboard U-28 wasn't isolated. For centuries, sailors, fishermen, and explorers across the globe, from South Africa to South America, from New Zealand to Canada, have told stories of creatures that resembled massive sea crocodiles. Some saw a jagged spine breaking the water's surface like a prehistoric dorsal ridge. Others described cold, lizard-like eyes watching from just beneath the waves. Skeptics argue it's all confusion, misidentified whales. Saltwater crocodiles, tricks of the light, but there's one detail they can't dismiss. The largest saltwater crocodile ever officially recorded was just over 20 feet long. So what then are the creatures that span nearly 3 times that size? If a mosasaur did survive, just one, in some remote, unexplored trench of the Atlantic or Pacific, it would only take a moment of disruption, a war, a bomb, a torpedo to force it to the surface. And then, like a ghost pulled from history, it would vanish again into the deep. Because maybe the past doesn't sleep beneath the ocean. Maybe it waits. There are places that seem too peaceful to hold secrets. A quiet lake, still water, mist curling across the surface like breath from another world. No sound, no wind, only silence. But sometimes silence hides something. In the Scottish Highlands, nestled between ancient hills and veils of fog, lies Loch Ness, a deep, narrow lake carved by glaciers and cloaked in myth. And within it, perhaps, lives one of the most enduring mysteries of all time. They call it Nessie. The first written account dates back to the year 565 AD, when a man named St. Columba claimed to have seen a water beast drag a swimmer beneath the surface. For centuries after, the story remained a whisper, local legend passed between generations, never proven, never forgotten. Then came the 1930s. A new road was built alongside the loch, and with it came tourists, thousands of eyes suddenly watching the water. And soon reports poured in, strange humps gliding across the lake, long necks rising above the waves, shadows moving just beneath the surface. Photographs followed, videos, eyewitness testimony. They described a creature not unlike something from another age, a massive body, 4 flipper-like limbs, and a long neck rising above the water like a question. Paleontologists recognized the silhouette, a plesiosaur, a marine reptile thought to have gone extinct 66 million years ago. But what if somehow one survived or evolved in secret? Skeptics pointed to hoaxes like the infamous 1934 surgeon's photo, later revealed to be a model mounted on a toy submarine. And yet, even after the lies were exposed, the sightings never stopped. Theories began to swirl. Some believed Loch Ness was connected to the sea through underwater tunnels, hidden channels formed during the Ice Age. Others suggested the loch was a kind of temporal bubble, an environment where ancient life, untouched by time, might still endure. And then came something unexpected. In 1977, off the coast of New Zealand, a Japanese fishing vessel hauled up a rotting carcass. It was long, pale, with fins and a neck that defied classification. Photos were taken. Analysis followed. Some said it was just a decomposing shark, but others weren't so sure. And stranger still, images surfaced in 2016 of something large, dark, and undulating beneath the surface of the River Thames in London, not far from the O2 Arena. Videos posted online showed a massive shape surfacing, then slipping away. Once, twice, 3 times. People speculated seal, dolphin, debris, but wildlife experts had no clear answer. No known animal matched the movement, the size, the silence. What then swims beneath a modern city? What then lingers in the stillness of ancient lakes? Perhaps Nessie is more than a creature. Perhaps it is a symbol of the things we've forgotten or left behind, of a time when the world was wilder, darker, and filled with beings we dared not name, and maybe some of them are still here, watching us from below. For as long as humans have dared to sail the open ocean, there has been one story whispered more than any other. The Kraken, a beast of unimaginable size, coiled tentacles rising from the deep, ships splintering like driftwood. Crews dragged screaming into the abyss. To sailors from medieval Europe to ancient Greece, the Kraken was not a tale, it was a warning, a living nightmare. For centuries, it was dismissed as folklore, a seafarer's hallucination. A ghost story told beneath creaking masts and stormy skies. But in 1857, that changed. On a quiet beach, Danish naturalist Japetta Steenstrup examined what had washed ashore, an enormous beak, curved like a parrot's, but larger than any living bird. Days later, 2 tentacles, lined with massive suction cups, were recovered from the waters near the Bahamas. The conclusion was stunning. This creature was real. Today, we call them giant squids, Architeuthis ducks. And in even rarer cases, colossal squids, dwelling at depths between 800 and 1,600 meters, where sunlight dies and pressure crushes. They are almost never seen alive. What we know comes mostly from carcasses washed ashore or dissected from the stomachs of sperm whales. For centuries, they remain the stuff of legend, until 2004, when the first live footage was captured in the deep Pacific. The world watched in awe, 15 meters long, eyes the size of dinner plates, tentacles like serpents, a creature not imagined but filmed. Still, something didn't quite fit. Giant squids are predators, but they're reclusive, shy. They don't attack ships, they don't hunt humans, and most importantly, they don't rise to the surface. So where then did the Kraken legend come from? Some believe ancient sailors witnessed dying squids, beached or floating, distorted by fear and distance. Others suggest that in the vastness of the open sea, men saw more than they could explain and filled in the blanks with terror. But another possibility lingers. What if Architeuthis is only a glimpse, a juvenile form, a smaller cousin, a surviving offshoot of something much older? A true leviathan, a creature that never had to surface, never had to hide, because it ruled the black trenches of the ocean long before we ever built sails. And maybe it still does, because the sea does not forget, it simply waits. And in the right storm, on the wrong night, far from any shore, those coiled limbs may rise once more, not as myth, but as memory. There's something strange about water. It reflects everything: sky, clouds, light, even us. We look down and it gives us our face, but it never gives us what's beneath. It is both mirror and veil. In lakes where fog lingers like forgotten breath, in rivers winding through cities too busy to look down, and in oceans so vast we still call them uncharted, we tell ourselves we've seen it all. We haven't. From the ice-slick shadows of Antarctica, to the black trenches where even sound is swallowed, to the still lakes that have existed longer than memory, stories rise like bubbles from the deep, not just of creatures, but of something older than fear, not evil, not necessarily dangerous, just watching. And perhaps that's the truth we've avoided, that the past hasn't died. It's just been sinking slowly to a place where we can't reach it. Until something stirs, until something watches back. So the next time you find yourself standing at the edge of the sea, pause, look down, and instead of asking, "Is something down there?" try asking, "Is something down there looking back at me?"